Okay, here we go. The name of the story is Bustanai. Bustanai is the name of the main character. We have a little introduction here that tells us about this legend, and that this is about the Jewish leadership in Babylonia. So it goes back 1,400 years or less, a little more, a little less, whatever. And it's a very old story, and we'll see that there are, I thought, a little bit of things that we could even relate to a little bit today on this day. So the name is Bustanai. I mean, it's wasn't given a name of a story, but it's an ancient story. So there it is. Do we have somebody who's going to offer to read today, please?
I could start.
Okay, Josie, thanks.
There we go. It is told that in the days of the kingdom of Persia, a certain foolish king arose, and it occurred to him to destroy the royal offspring. So he seized all the offspring of the house of David throughout his realm and slew them. He arrested their kinfolk and sons-in-law and all who were closely acquainted with them and put them in prison. And he gave orders that the swill of unclean food be poured over them in order to pollute them and make them filthy with carrion cooking. He decreed that their children be dashed to the ground and their pregnant women cleft apart. Yet God took pity on the seed of the house of David, and the bride of one of their youths, who was slain during the days of her espousal, was left alive after she had conceived. Now this king dreamed that he was standing in a garden by a pavilion which contained every kind of tree that was pleasant to see and gave good fruit. Knowing that this orchard was not his, he flung the fruit to the earth in furious jealousy. After splitting and cutting down the trees, he went searching further to see whether there were any roots left so that he could uproot them and make sure that not a single root capable of giving rise to fruit and branches would be left. After some time, he found one root from which something like a branch was growing out of the earth. He lifted up the axe in his hand to destroy it when, lo and behold, an old man stood before him. Reddish he was, with fine eyes and good to look at. This old man upbraided him and cried aloud, a loud and bitter cry, and snatched the axe from his hand and smote him on his brow so that his blood ran down his face and beard, and he was about to perish. He fell with his face to the ground and wept and entreated the old man, saying, I pray you, my lord, let me entreat you not to destroy me, for what have I done to you? What has my sin and transgression been for you to come against me?
Just a little note that when we have this description of the old man, reddish or ruddy, he was with fine eyes and good to look at, that is an echo of the description in the Tanakh of the young David. So it's an echo. Okay, so this king who's destroying this orchard that is not his. We could read this next week for Tu B'Shvat also. So this old man comes and he says to the old man, "What have I done to you? Why did you attack me?" Go ahead.
Then the old man answered him, "This is far from enough to repay the evil you have done."
Is everybody frozen?
We lost Josie.
Josie, we lost.
I'm okay.
You can hear Josie? I can't hear Josie.
I don't hear anything other than you.
Josie is frozen.
Josie, we lost you.
We lost you.
Yeah, that's the problem with my computer. Somebody else.
Everybody's having computer. Don't worry, you're doing fine. So start again, please. From this is far from enough to how does it go? How does he say? Far to repay The evil you have done me. Go ahead.
The evil you have done me. You have come to my garden to lay it waste. If you found good fruit, why have you not eaten from it and placed some in your basket? And if you desire fruit trees, why have you not planted your own? Not only have you ripped off branches and leaves and flowers and everything without
And
even
and
leaving
plants.
and plants and fruits, but you wish to wreak your worst and to uproot everything without even leaving a growing root. I moaned for the garden which I planted and watered and tended so many years, and all that was left to me of the entire garden was this one root. Maybe there is hope in it, said I, and this will be my consolation when I water it and tend it until its branches grow, and from it I can renew my whole garden. Yet you have raised your axe to destroy it as well, and leave not a single sprouting root in my garden. And in your arrogance, you thought that you are righteous in your own eyes. Why, this is a criminal transgression, and the little I have done is recompense for your abominations. For I sought to remove you
I ought to remove.
for I ought to remove you from the land of the living and blot your memory out from under the heavens. Then the king went on weeping before him and lay prostrate at his feet and entreated, I pray you, my lord, I have done foolishly, but now I repent my deeds, and after I have learned of this, I smite myself on the thigh. Let my soul be precious in your sight, and do not slay me. For in all truth, I give you an assurance that I shall water this plant at the proper times, and shall visit it on occasion, and preserve it day and night until it spreads branches like a mighty cedar. From its offshoots, I shall plant every bed in your garden until it once again becomes what it was. And as for what I have done, forgive me, for I erred.
Wouldn't it be nice if you could hear a ruler say that? Okay, go ahead.
When the king woke up from his dream, he found his blood running over his couch, and he was distressed, and his mind was upset until daylight. In the morning, he rose early and summoned all his sages and wizards and
Told them. No, you're on
Lost her
mute.
again.
You went on mute.
No, we lost her again.
No, if her mouth is moving, then we didn't lose her completely.
No, but there's no microphone, red microphone, so she's not muted.
were counselors.
All right, Josie, we lost you.
Yeah,
In the
I
morning.
have this problem every once in a while.
Maybe you should see a doctor. What can I tell you?
A computer guy. In the morning, he rose early and summoned all his sages and wizards and told them his distress. They were silent, for they could not find any answer to give to him. But one of his attendants spoke up, saying, My lord king, surely you know that the sages of the Jews and their royal offspring were counselors to kings in their exile, and all the requirements of the realm were entrusted to them. The monarchs who preceded you used to give them their regular requirements and gifts day after day, in order that they might interpret and tell them various enigmas and all wisdom and the fleeting thoughts and dreams of night. Now you have taken counsel to slay them in wrath and make an end of them. They are imprisoned and shackled under guard. Yet now, if it seems proper in your eyes to seek out of those wise men of theirs who are subject to detention, one who has the understanding to stand before you, you tell him your dream and hear what he has to say. Maybe you will find a satisfactory answer from them.
What does this remind us of?
Joseph and the dreams of the Pharaoh.
Right. Right, and except here we have it kind of a little bit of a reversal, right? These are sages, and they used to work for the king, and they used to be respected. Now they've been thrown into the dungeon, into jail, and but they can be the ones to interpret the dream. So yeah, these are all these reverse echoes of the biblical story. This found
favor in the king's sight. Oops. And he ordered that one of their wise men be brought, and his prison garb changed, so that he should stand before him, since he had an urgent question which his own sages could not answer, though they were the wisest of the wise, and nothing was hidden from them. So the royal attendant came and brought the king's words to the imprisoned Jewish nobles. Thereupon one of the most ancient and wise among them, into whose family one of the youngest of the house of David had wedded only to be slain during his espousals, responded and said, I shall stand before the king and tell him whatever he has in his heart. Why should you hurry to do this? His imprisoned friends and kin asked him. You do not know the question that you will be asked. But he told them, the king has dreamed a dream, and just as he saw it, so did I see it. Furthermore, I know its meaning. Thereupon his friends and kin blessed him, saying, May the Lord your God aid you and give your grace and kindness so as to speak in the presence of the king and not be shamed.
it probably should
Then
be
the
you.
royal-
It's a typo. Good.
Then the royal attendant said to him, Wash and anoint yourself. Here are garments. Take them and put them on, and leave your prison garb behind, for such is the royal behest. But the old man took oath that he would not bathe himself and would not change his prison garb until he had appeared in the royal presence. So he went and spoke in the presence of the king, and the signs of his mourning could be clearly seen. And the odor of the filthy slops poured over him could be smelled, and every eye that looked upon him wept. Then the king said to him, I have dreamed a dream, but there is no one who can interpret it. Do you know how to explain a dream when you hear it? Why, said the old man, solutions are God's. Tell me, my lord king, or if you prefer, I shall tell it to you.
Okay, so we have, again, wait 1 second, we have this again, following along the lines of the Joseph story with some reversals. What's a major reversal that we have here from the Joseph story? What's one major change? The answer is,
The sage knows the story as well as the king. It's not as if Pharaoh told the story to Joseph,
right?
and
But
Joseph interpreted.
Before we get to that, there's a one big difference. The big difference is the changing the clothes. In the Joseph story, he is taken out of the dungeon and he's washed up and he's cleaned and everything to make him presentable before the king. And here, this is exactly what the king wants, but the sage refuses to go along with this. Right? With the sage, why is the sage in Joseph's case, he does it. In the sage's case, he refuses. Why does he refuse? Why doesn't he go along with this tried and true traditional thing?
Because he knew of the dream.
So what is that? Why does that explain why he shouldn't wash himself up?
I haven't figured that one out yet.
So he can see what he's done.
Yeah.
So who can see what he's done?
The king who imprisoned him.
So this is about identity, right? In Joseph's case, he wants to survive. He needs to be rescued from prison. He's being restored to a decent appearance. But this sage is coming to this man going, you're not going to avoid, you did something here. You did this. In Pharaoh's case, Pharaoh didn't do anything to Joseph, right? But here the sage is coming to this king and saying, you are responsible. I am a Jew. You know how I am a Jew? Because I stink. You know why I stink? Because you poured over me all of this slop and garbage to make me repugnant and abominable. Well, guess what? You have to own up to this. This is who I am. I am this person, and I am not going to be, I don't need you to give me my dignity. Right? Joseph needed Pharaoh to rescue him. This man says, be what it will. I am who I am. You need me. I don't need you. Okay. So now he says, I know exactly the dream. You don't even have to tell me. If you know it.
If you know it, said the king, tell it. So he told it to him, reminding him of all the details he had forgotten. The astonished king said, there is no turning right or left from all you have said. But now explain the meaning, for that will be the test. Then he began to interpret it, tears running from his eyes, and he said, my lord king, the garden you saw is the family of the house of David. The trees therein, both large and small, were his offspring, elders and young men and children. The fruits which were so pleasant to see and good to eat were the sages who were versed in every wisdom and knew all knowledge, who did righteousness and performed justice. That you stood in your wisdom over against the garden and wished to cut down every tree with its branches and leaves together, that is the decree you made to slay them and cleave apart the pregnant women and dash the children to the ground and smite them with the sword and massacre them all. When you went searching through the garden to see if there was any root or shoot or seedling so that you could uproot it, and you found one root with a shoot sprouting from the ground, it is the truth. It will soon become known that one pregnant woman of the house of David has remained alive. The root you saw in your dream and against which you raised your axe was your intention to seek them all out and destroy the royal offspring. As for the old man who appeared and upbraided you and cried out aloud, that is David, king of Israel. May he rest in peace. As for your entreaty to him to water all the beds until the shoot grows into a mighty cedar, that means you will restore and make a covenant from this day forth to guard the pregnant woman with all her kin.
So this is the interpretation of the dream. The idea that there's a root with a shoot growing out of it, and that's the remaining remnant of the house of David. This is a messianic image. When we have Isaiah talk about what's going to happen at the end of days, he says there's going to be a shoot that's going to grow out of the chopped down trunk of the house of Jesse. And that's going to be the Mashiach. That's going to be the person who's going to come and redeem everyone at the end of time. In our daily prayers, in the Amidah, we have one of the blessings in the middle of the Amidah, Et Tzemach David Avdecha Mehirat Hatzmiach. May you please speedily make the shoot of David grow and sprout. So this is that image. Okay, so now the question. Go ahead.
It'd be so much better if these kings were better at interpreting very simple, straightforward allegories in their dreams.
Well, it would be even simpler. It would be even better if they didn't, do the stuff that requires the dream to happen. Yeah.
It would be nice if they were decent people.
Right. Well, this is, the image is this image of just wanton destruction, of taking something that is, traditions and took years to build, and just tear it down. And now he's afraid simply because, of course, he's afraid for his own life. So now all of a sudden he thinks that it's wrong. All right, let's see. Then the king answered.
Then the king answered, indeed, I know that your interpretation is true. Now seek and find whether any woman is left who is pregnant from the offspring of the house of David. And I shall treat her graciously and favorably view the child that will come forth from her. I shall fulfill all I have promised and bring him up as long as I live on earth.
Okay, so let's think of another possible biblical parallel to that.
When Pharaoh made Joseph the head of everything, and then once Pharaoh passed away, and after years that the Egyptians didn't know of Joseph, after Joseph passed away,
Well,
the Egyptians didn't know of Joseph, and that's when the Hebrews were enslaved.
Okay, so that's maybe a little bit about what happened before, but the fact that the king is promising to raise this baby in his own palace. What does that remind?
Pharaoh's daughter raised Moses.
Pharaoh's daughter raises Moses, right? So another redeemer of Israel. Okay, when the old man. Josie, we're back to you. Unfreeze yourself. When the old man, right here.
Okay, when the old man heard these words, he could not restrain himself, but burst into tears and wept aloud, saying, "My Lord King, I am the one that has drunk the goblet of venom to the very dregs. I had married my daughter to one of the choicest of the youths of that family, and while he was rejoicing with her, you made the decree to destroy the whole house of David, and an end was made of him among them. I was imprisoned together with their kinfolk and acquaintances, while my daughter has remained a widow for several months, but I do not know whether she is pregnant or not." "Go home," said the king, "and tell your daughter that I have set you free today, together with all your companions who were imprisoned with you. I have given command that none of you is to be tormented anymore, and I shall keep."
We lost the sound. Josie, we lost your sound. Maybe we'll do it like karaoke. Do it like reverse karaoke. Somebody else follows Josie's lips and gives the sound. What do you think? Josie,
Can't hurt.
Are you back yet?
No,
I'm trying to order
Yeah, there you go.
Galaprant, which I have ordered
Am I
from you for
back?
a long time. I'm wondering
Okay,
if there's
now you're
any.
back. Okay, so here we are. So now, all right, and I shall keep my eye on you. That's where we lost you.
All right. And the king took his ring off his finger and gave it to him in regard to all these matters, and they released all the prisoners. So the old man returned home, where they told him that the Lord had made his daughter fruitful. He rejoiced and thanked the Lord, and all Israel rejoiced together with him. Then the old man returned to the king and informed him. He too rejoiced and summoned a certain eunuch and ordered him to prepare a pavilion in the royal court and have it ready for the expectant woman with all she required, and to bring the young woman before him. Together with her father and kinsfolk, they prepared everything for her with the utmost honor as the king commanded. And the king urged his attendants to provide for her with her couch and dainties in summer and winter, so that nothing might be missing and all things should be in full royal style. When her time was finished, she gave birth to a son and called his name Bustani. Bustanai. For the word Bustan means garden in Persian, and it was a garden that the king of Persia had seen in his dreams. So there was great joy in Israel, and good tidings went to those near and far that the Lord had left a survivor for David and had remembered his mercies and his loving kindness, and had not permitted his offspring to be cut off entirely. And they all praised the Lord their God.
Okay,
The
next.
child Bustanai. Okay.
Did you notice that Sotomayor didn't pronounce Kamala Harris?
Yes. She put the stress on the wrong syllable. Okay. The child Bustanai grew and was weaned and studied Torah and Mishnah, Talmud and law, and wisdom and understanding. The king was informed and wished to see him. He ordered him to be brought before him, and God had given the child of the of the glorious loving kindness that had marked David. So he stood before the king in the beauty of his wisdom, and the king and all his sages were astonished at the lad. So Bustanai stood before the king from the time he entered until evening without moving his head or shifting his foot. A fly came and stood on his temple, which was like a pomegranate clove, and it bit him and stung him, but he did not drive it away, and his blood dripped in the royal presence. "What has happened to you?" asked the king, and he answered, "Is what you see, my lord king."
Uh-oh.
All right, John, how about you take
Right.
over, and when Josie gets back, she'll take over from you.
It is what you see, my lord king. He looked and saw that the insect was biting at his temple.
Okay.
Why don't you drive it away? Said the king to him. And the youngster answered, "We have inherited the tradition from our ancestors that ever since we lost our royal crown and have been required to take up station in any royal palace, we do not speak or laugh or raise our hands before the king in whose presence we stand."
Okay. Josie, you back?
Yeah, but I don't mind if John wants to continue, because this must be annoying to everybody.
All right. Well,
I-
okay. Go ahead, John.
Okay.
So all right.
The king-
So he's got this tradition.
Ah,
What does that tradition say to us?
that he respects the office, I guess.
I mean, this is a kind of a little metaphor for Jewish wisdom throughout the exile, throughout the diaspora. When we're standing before some other person that has power over us, in other words, wherever we are, wherever the Jewish supposed to be, shash still, right? Be quiet. Don't stir up the hornet's nest or the fly's nest. Don't be
Don't
call
be
atten-
noticed, right?
don't call attention to yourself. Be super respectful. Be, if everybody else has to be respectful, you have to be twice as respectful. All of that kind of stuff to fit in and to get by and to be allowed to survive.
But this is the murderer of his father.
And guess what? He could be his murderer too.
Yeah.
Okay, we continue. John, it's on you.
The king approved of this, for he knew that a wise person was speaking. He ordered that he should be given the second chariot to ride in and gave him gifts in royal fashion. And they cried as he went, "This is the way to treat the knightly prince of the exiles of Israel." For the king knew his wisdom and intelligence.
So this little feature reminds us of what? What are our biblical parallels?
Pharaoh gave Joseph a lot of honor and fancy.
And he went through riding on the king's horse and so on. Good. And another parallel that we can remind ourselves of. Hint. It's going to be coming up.
Purim, when Mordecai was
That's
honored.
right. Exactly. Right?
Because parts of this I keep thinking of the story of Esther. I can't tie it together, and it's not similar, but different parts of it remind me of the story of Esther.
Yeah, there you go. Well, so the story of Esther, of course, is also a diaspora exile, Jewish survival story. Okay, so here he is. He's elevated and honored by the king. Go ahead. For the king knew his wisdom and intelligence.
For the king knew his wisdom and intelligence. Israel rejoiced exceedingly that God had left a remnant to David and had fulfilled the promise of Isaiah. And the remnant of the house of Judah that is left shall prosper. And the king ordered him to appoint judges under him and engage in all the requirements of the realm and lead the sages who headed the academies, one on his right hand and one on his left. The right hand sage being the Gaon of Surah, and
Gaon.
And the left hand one being the Gaon of Nehardiah.
Neharda and Pumbedita. These are places that were the major academies that created the Babylonian Talmud. So he is the the ruler of the Jewish community, and the sages who are the heads of these different academies, the Gaonim, Gaon single and Gaonim plural, they are sitting to his right and his left, and he is their head. The word Gaon means eminence. And we have it later on. This was the official title of the head of each of these academies. And later on in the 18th century, we had one of the great Rabbinic figures, scholars, the Vilna Gaon, right? The Vilna Gaon. So the word Gaon, in proper pronunciation of Gaon, in European pronunciation, that's eminence, or a Talmudic genius. This guy is a Gaon. So there was other people that were called Gaonim because they were just so prodigiously learned and smart. So, but the word means eminence. So they are sitting on both sides. Go ahead. Their function?
Their function being to serve as supreme judges with his permission throughout the borders of Israel. The practice continued throughout Israel for a long time until the king of Ishmael arose and set judges and assessors to act as judges for all the nations, and did not require the judges of Israel. But the princes of the exiles have not ceased until now, and therefore there is a fly on every seal of the princes of the exiles, with which they seal on account of this incident which occurred to Prince Bustanai before the king when the insect descended on his temple, and he did not raise his hand because of the awe of the royal presence.
Okay, so who's the king of Ishmael?
I don't know.
The story says, and this went on. Bustanai was established as the head of the Jewish community. The Jewish community was given its freedom and dignity. They weren't being harassed, and their leadership wasn't being murdered. And
Is this story?
This went on until the king of Ishmael came up. King of Ishmael is Muhammad. The king of Ishmael is when Islam overran Mesopotamia and Persia and so on, and took over and then started marching, west. But the Talmudic period roughly concludes, right, with the rise of Islam. So Islam begins in the 7th century CE, and that's pretty much when the Talmud itself peters out. There are still academies for a while, and that's what he says in the next paragraph, at the end of that. No, the princes of exiles have not ceased until now. There are still people that are seen as the heads of the community, but the whole vitality of the Jewish community was much diminished as a result, and other developments took over in terms of where Torah learning continued. Okay, anybody had a comment? I saw somebody, John, you wanted to say something?
No, I was wondering if this was this written in I guess it predates the Spanish, I forget what that period's called when Jews and
The Golden
Muslims,
Age?
yeah,
Yes.
there's a name for it though,
Yeah.
Hebrew name.
Haskalah
or something like that.
Oh, there's the Convivencia, and or the Golden Age, the Torah HaZahav. But this
Later.
is this is
Yeah.
before, this is the era right before. It's the era before the Iberian community established itself. The Iberian community was able to establish itself in some measure because the Babylonian community was beginning to lose its preeminence. So this is a story both of Bustanai standing up and taking over, but also it's being told retrospectively from a time when actually the golden age, not of Spain, but the golden age of the Jewish people in Babylonia is also faltering, right? And that's what allowed actually Spain to take over, right? The Jewish people have centers of importance that move from one country to another, from one even civilization to another. For the longest time, it was the Babylonian and then the Muslim civilization that was the heart of Jewish living. and what we call Ashkenazi Jews were actually a tiny little proportion of the Jewish people and didn't have a lot to show for themselves. By the time we get to the 19th century, the shoe is on the other foot. The majority of Jewish people are Ashkenazim, and the Sephardi or Mizrahi community is secondary. So these are the shifts of Jewish history. So this is a legend that tries to track the rise, and to a little bit, as we'll see also, the rise and then the kind of a gentle fall of the Jewish community in Babylonia. Okay, next section.
As for other facts about the greatness of Bustanai, who was elevated by the king over all the captains and the viceroys, they will be found written in the records of the house of David, but we see fit to mention and show a little of his greatness. Once the king of Ishmael, namely Ali ben Abu Talib, passed nearby with many high officers and captains. Bustanai came forth to meet him with the Torah scroll and holy scriptures and holy names in his hand. With him was the vast assembly of Israel, and he went to receive Ali, the king of Ishmael, who rejoiced greatly to meet him and requested him to bless him and pray for him. Ali gave him fine garments from the spoils that he had taken and asked whether he had any sons. He answered that he was not yet wedded because he had not found a suitable spouse of his own age. At this, the Caliph Ali was very much astonished because Bustanai was then 35 years old. He therefore gave him the daughter of the king of Dara to wife. The maiden was a beautiful virgin, but he did not wish to take her. Ali adjured him until he received her from him. And Ali said to him, "She is fit and proper for a man like you, and after all, David, your father, took for him beautiful concubines without a marriage writ and without nuptial rights." But Bustanai answered him, "His blessed name permits Israel to take beautiful women only in time of war. Other than in time of war, it is necessary to have a marriage writ and nuptial rights and immersion." Then Ali said, "You have authority to do all these with her." So Bustanai took her to wife after the immersion and gave her a marriage writ and nuptial rights. She found favor in his eyes, and sons were born of him to her. After his death, his sons from another wife objected to them and said, "You have no portion in the heritage of our father with us, for you are the sons of a maidservant." So a quarrel began among them, and they were supported by partisans, and the matter was brought to the courts, where it was decided that they could not be separated from the heritage of their father, and there was no blemish in their pedigree, even if their mother had not a marriage writ. For it is the point of our law and practice that a man does not regard his regular cohabitation with a woman as fornication, and certainly not a prince and sage like Bustanai. All this is written in the books of the house of David. They have enigmas and hints marked and pointed with proclaim their royal worth in every generation. May the Lord in his mercies restore the crown as of old, to fulfill the verse, and I will restore your judges as in the beginning. Amen.
Amen. So this is a little bit of a strange, coda here at the last section of this story. What do we make of this whole story? First of all, of course, it's a little anachronistic. Bustanai ends up becoming kind of like Pharaoh. It's a name that goes from one generation to the next, because there's been a Bustanai, from years before, and now we're already in the Muslim era, and there's a new Bustanai. What does this story tell us?
Yeah, no idea.
Okay.
I don't know. It's going to take a bit of dissecting.
It will. Again,
It's
Go ahead.
seemed pretty warm today.
I mean, it reminds me of
I would not say.
the original Ishmael story a little bit.
Maybe that'll make
That inheritance is
It might be like 40.
in question because of being a maidservant.
30.
that's for sure. But before we get to that,
41 in Washington.
before we get to the inheritance, we have to get to the marriage part itself. And here we get this discussion, which is about cohabitation between Jews and non-Jews, right? This is in a literal way bringing up the touchy question of living together, Jews and non-Jews living together, as a people, as communities. On the one hand, if we're out of the dungeon and out of the ghetto, then and we're recognized as being upstanding citizens and respectable, and we have our own power even, then it's inevitable that there's going to be discussions about matchmaking. It's inevitable that the connections will be made on many levels. So, Bustanai is an eligible bachelor, and why not? And somebody that has good dealings with him, feels that he's going to be an eligible mate. And of course, Bustanai doesn't quite have the complete power to say no, right? The king of Ishmael, Ali, the sheikh, is the real boss, right? Bustanai is the respected head of the Jewish community, but the Jewish community, again, is at the mercy of the greater powers around them. So we have this kind of back and forth negotiation, and we have a little bit of a kind of a pondering. Well, David had a lot of wives, and of course Solomon had even more wives, and we get this kind of like halachic discussion between Bustanai and the sheikh, and Bustanai says, you know what, I can't just have this person be my partner. When David had took other wives, it was because he was a military man, and the Torah allows that. This is all kinds of stuff that we find in the book of Deuteronomy. So what happens in the end, of course, is the woman has no say in the matter. Why should she? But she has to convert in order to be acceptable as a spouse for Bustanai, right? Meanwhile, years later, and that's it. And so that's like happy ending, so to speak, until we get to the last paragraph there. What do we, but before we get to that part, at the top of the screen here, but we see fit to mention and show a little of his greatness. Is this story a story that tells us something about Bustanai's greatness?
No.
Well, according to the storyteller, the answer is yes.
Yeah, I mean, what if he'd said no? He would probably, a lot of people would have been punished for that.
So in what ways, how do we describe that this story reflects on Bustanai's greatness?
He made a choice not just for himself.
Well, before we get to that part, the fact that he's noticed by the sheikh and that the sheikh wants to marry him off, that shows his greatness, right? The sheikh is not running around running a matchmaker service for just any Joe Schmo, right? This person is he's great, he's important, he's a VIP. So that shows the first level of his importance and the first level of his greatness. And then, as you point out, then how he handles that greatness, how he handles that position of privilege that he has in a way that he hopes will not betray being a Jew. This, of course, all through history, you had people who were close to Jews, who were close to people of power.
Yeah.
And then the question was, how Jewish do they remain? How Jewish do they allow themselves to act or to look? Do they have to fit in or not? So this has been a perpetual question in the halls of power. How much do you stay Jewish? How much do you look publicly Jewish? You had somebody like Benjamin Disraeli,
That's right.
right? He couldn't run away from his name. He didn't change his name. On the other hand, he did change his religion. So, and we've had stories before about that. Remember, remember the lottery ticket story? Some of you who might have been for that one, where the son of the pious, shamish in the little town, in order for him to get ahead, in order for him to get a position in the university. So he gives it all up.
Didn't
So
Mendelssohn convert?
he didn't convert, but his grandson converted.
Oh,
So yeah, so these are the kinds of things that that are on the mind. This story is, even though it's a kind of a fairy tale story of wonderful times in the past, it still reflects a lot of the stress and the tensions that the community was feeling. And then when we get to the end of the story, after his death, then of course we get, a biblical parallel again. So some things never change. Human nature certainly doesn't change. But what's the struggle at the end there?
the sons.
The sons from another wife, which I'm assuming is his first wife, object to her.
Well, it's not his first wife, because he apparently, when he married this other woman that was fixed up for him by the sheikh, by the khalif,
That was his first wife.
that was his first wife. He wasn't married yet. That was the whole
Hmm.
point. He was 35 years old and he wasn't married yet. So
So-
that was his first wife. The problem was, though, that she wasn't Jewish originally. This is the old, story of prejudice. Even though she converts, she's not seen by his other wife, who apparently he found someplace within the Jewish community. And they're going, we have much more, solid pedigree than you. You guys don't count. And we're not going to accept you. And they challenged their legitimacy, their standing within the Jewish community. So this is now not outside with other rulers like the king and the Khalif. This is within the Jewish community itself. Who's in and who's out? What kind of attitudes do we have with each other? And what's the court decision?
That they're okay. They
That
do
they're
have.
okay, right? That the court says you can't start oppressing these people. You can't start discriminating against these people. They were properly married, and these are legitimate children, and that's something to be accepted and celebrated. So this is and at the end, they talk about, was this a phony marriage? Was it a marriage of convenience? No, we have a Jewish law that says that if two people are living together, we accept that they have every intention of being respectable and that they want their relationship to be seen as a respectable married relationship.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I was struck that the original king who did all these terrible things repented, because I didn't think he was going to. I thought he was going to pull a fast one and keep on being.
But then we
evil.
wouldn't be here to tell the story.
Yeah, that came as a surprise to me.
So
Rabbi?
is this like Ruth? I mean, so a convert, maybe one of her sons carries the house of David, right? So
But that's what we have, of course. That's a very good point, right? The whole story of the house of David comes from some very eyebrow-raising relationships, right? Before we get to Ruth, we go all the way back, and Ruth's ancestry is an incestuous relationship, right? Moab is born when Lot sleeps with one of his daughters after the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, after the destruction of, and they are, survivors, and they say, there's nobody else around. We're going to have to sleep with dad. And they have, each has a son. One has Ammon and one has Moab. Moab then becomes a people, and that people is the people from whom Ruth derives. And then, of course, Ruth comes into the Jewish people and becomes the mother of Obed, and then of course that becomes, he's the great grandfather of David. So the Mashiach, and I skipped one, of course, because we also have the story of Judah, and Tamar. So the whole story of this redemptive family, the house of David, is shot through with very controversial moments of generating life.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
if you take it to currently in this day and age to Israel, and it depends on if you have somebody who converted and you move to Israel or something, they question your conversion. That they
Yeah.
sometimes, so you can almost take this straight to current Israel.
Yeah, this is a phenomenon that didn't come up all of a sudden, but it is, as we see here. I mean, obviously, it's also motivated. These sons are motivated also by money, right? It's in their interest to disqualify these other children of this woman, because that gives them more money. They get the inheritance more. So it's not simply a principle or something that, for the sake of the
All right.
unity of the Jewish people. It's also a lot of self-interest. But it's not just self-interest. People hate and discriminate not just out of self-interest. Sometimes it's against their own self-interest, and they still are full of prejudice and hatred. We see that in our own country right to this very moment. So what's going on in Israel is a kind of a unfortunate rise of jingoism, of racist kind of nationalism. The people in power in Israel are people who are right-wing nationalists, and in religious terms, fundamentalist and hateful people. It's a tragedy. We're in a bad state in Israel. Today is a day of rejoicing, as far as I'm concerned, in the United States, where we dodged a terrible bullet. But in Israel, they didn't. In Israel, they've been going through this kind of garbage for, one election cycle, and then another election cycle, and then another election cycle. They're going to have a fourth election in a month and a half, within 2 years. And they never get themselves straight. They never can actually learn from their mistakes. So it's a tragedy. It's really sad. Yeah. Okay. Any other comments
Very
for
strange.
today? Okay, so maybe we'll end a couple of minutes early with your permission.
Not a problem.
And hopefully we see each other next week, and we'll all be seeing wonderful progress in our country. Okay?
All right. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
Yasher
So wait,
koach.
I gotta do this.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Yashikoa.
Rabbi.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.